Alrighty. Okay. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024, and the time is 5 p.m. I would like to call to order the ISD 191 Board of Education's Policy Review Committee meeting. Welcome to our audiences. We will begin with the new policies, Policy 606, Instructional Materials, presented by Amina Aftadal, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment.
All right. Thank you, members of the board. I am sharing with you Policy 606. This is a policy that I'm suggesting that we rename. MSBA provided us with a separate policy, 606A, that addressed library media materials, whereas 606, the original policy, only addressed textbooks and curricular materials. And so rather than having two separate policies, working with our media specialists and our principals, the recommendation is to put that together as one single policy, since all of those things, both media and library materials, are being used for curricular resources and curricular support. So we've taken the two MSBA policy, or the MSBA new policy and our current 606 policy, and kind of merged them together. So some areas that I think is important is that we did rename it so that it is not just instructional resources, but also library materials. The statement of the purpose of the policy also indicates not only selection but also reconsideration. I think that while we have not seen significant numbers of requests for reconsideration, it's important for us to have a very clear policy and a procedure for that to exist, not only for our instructional materials, but also for our library media. So that's one of the main reasons for that suggestion. In Section 3, it does include significant numbers of definitions to include those definitions of what exactly we mean when we say library materials, so that it can be defined rather than addressing, being very specific about saying what qualifies as library materials, regardless of what site it is. And so, and recognizing that as those things that exist at the separate sites, because we do have very different media's collections at the different sites. So that definition is there. The difference then to identify what library collections are versus library materials. And then also the policy suggested a definition for our library media specialist. Because we name that position throughout the policy, we wanted to make sure that we had that legal definition in there as well. Under the new Section 4, which is responsibility of selection, we have embedded in Section C, in paragraph C, the selection of library materials versus the existing procedure that existed for guidance for selecting instructional materials. And so that really does, it aligns with the licensure of a library media specialist and their job and responsibilities, which is to review materials for possible inclusion in the library collection. And they do have a very distinct responsibility in order to make those decisions about which materials are being included in the library. One of the things that the library media specialists as a team wanted to make sure was there is that the idea that we are providing library materials that do offer a wide perspective or a wide array of people's perspectives and points of view, even those that we may disagree with, and that allows folks to be able to see multiple facets of a particular issue or a topic, and that the actual background of the author should not simply be one of the reasons why we would prevent materials from being included in our collection. So, for example, there have been historical figures who have written very seminal pieces of literature or nonfiction that should be included as a historical perspective in a media collection. And regardless of their particular background, their points of view on politics or those particular things, that their work still has historical importance and influence. And so they wanted to make sure that we were able to include that within, in case those things might be challenged by saying, you know, a particular author holds this particular political view, which we disagree with, just to know that that's important to have in a library collection. Then looking at Section 5, or Section 6, where we talk about reconsideration, we have made some different kinds of changes to that, really kind of to narrow down who is responsible for making reconsideration requests, and really trying to narrow that down to people who are part of our school community, families who have children in the community, persons who would be either an employee, a student, or a caregiver, a parent or guardian of a student in the school. Would request that. And part of the reason for that is to ensure that we don't have outside influences who aren't part of our school community, trying to create challenges for things that don't, or create controversy that doesn't exist already in our school community. So that was one of the restrictions that we had within there. For number 6, Section 6, really making sure that in that procedure that we are being very specific for item number 7, that the access to instructional materials is not automatically removed simply because that material is being under review. And then we did add in the procedures specifically calling out the library media specialist as a member of the reconsideration team if it includes library materials. And then we added one component that was suggested by the MSBA policy and also was promoted in a couple of different sessions that I attended with the MASA, was the idea of once we have reviewed an instructional material or a library materials, that we put a limit on when that material can come before us for reconsideration again. And in this case, the recommendation was 3 years. So those are the significant changes within the policy.
All right, thank you, Amina. Any discussions, Director Connor?
I like the idea that we combined it. That's all. I just have a comment. That's all, that they combined the policy. And even though it's kind of long, it's very detailed, and I like that too. I like the idea of saying that the superintendent kind of pretty much has the last say on it. And yeah, just very specific. I like that. And then I also like on 606, what was 606.3? Yeah, how they mentioned that the library materials shall meet high standards of quality in more than one way. So like artistic quality, and then it said authenticity, which is important, critical thinking, educational significance, and factual content. So it's great.
Good.
That's my only comment.
I just had a quick question. So so I understand these are two policies that are kind of combined. So is the original one, the non-blue stuff would be our original
I don't know.
policy?
Mine is a different color.
Yeah.
The original is in black. Yes.
Okay.
And so, yes, policy 606 did exist in, has been a policy that we've had. MSBA came out with 606A as a model, and we combined it into here.
So now it's just going to be 606, though, not a 606A.
Nope, it'll just be 606.
All right. I think that's all the questions I had. Okay, Sarah, I think this one is going to be on first reading.
First reading.
First reading, 606. Yep.
Director Mercer, I do have a couple of edits.
Okay.
So under 3E. There is no E.
3E.
I don't have E.
You don't have it, but it does on the board book.
Okay.
The copy I have. There
Oh,
is
I
no
see.
E.
I
It
do
ends
see.
with D.
Yeah, okay.
And then also under 6E, it should be reviewed, will not be reviewed again, so an ED. Sorry, I didn't miss.
You said B
that
as in boy, 6B?
ED, review.
Oh, D.
Reviewed.
Okay.
Once reviewed, instructional resources, and library materials will not be reviewed again within 3 years. Catch that, Sarah? Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
All right, and now we'll move on to policies with changes. Policy 416, drug and alcohol testing, presented by Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Good evening. 416 is pretty straightforward, although there's a lot of red all over the document. It's just adding cannabis into our drug testing procedure. So we'll have drug, alcohol, and cannabis testing. The different levels of cannabis, as far as the delivery methods, gummies, flowers, the different ways with that. It also updates our policy for testing for bus drivers. We don't have a fleet of buses. We contract that out, but the contractors do follow our policies as well as state laws and testing for that as well. The other items that are updated are the forms that have to be delivered to individuals when we are testing or sending them to be tested. So those are also being updated to reflect the policies.
Right.
Is that it?
Any discussions?
Yeah, I just had a question. So is our Schmitty and Sons on board with the drug testing then?
Again,
policy.
the testing for the policies actually from MSBA reflect the laws. So we're putting the policy listed. Schmitty and Sons as a contractor do abide by our policies. But even if our policy didn't state it specifically, they would still have to follow the laws on testing for busing.
Only other thing I had a comment to that I also think this one's very detailed. I like that they mentioned that the drug testing was for whom and when, and that they can do random drug testings if they expect anyone that's around children, any kind of educational children or any supervision of children may be randomly drug tested. And then how the test is administered. I was surprised at how detailed they were about how it's administered, how long, the samples, everything. So I think it's very detailed, very good. And that it doesn't prohibit applicants from actually being hired because of it.
Very much reasonable suspicion drives the testing procedures. Yep.
Yep, definitely provides a lot of clarity, which is great. So, anything else? All right, Sarah, I'm going to also put this one on first reading.
Just to clarify, will this be first reading for the March?
Yes, for March, not the 22nd, no, March.
From March, oh,
Yeah, it's a ways away.
Okay, we are still on policies with changes. We're moving on to policy 105, Equity, Access, and Excellence in Education, presented by Isis Buchanan, Director of Educational Equity.
Hello, Chair Mursal, Director Connor. And so we are proposing the revisions of Policy 105, Equity, Access, and Excellence in Education. The revisions include the legal reference because there's a Minnesota statute 124D.792, graduation ceremonies, tribal regalia, and objects of cultural significance. And so we wanted to add that legal reference as well as the language that is underlined. A school district or charter school must not prohibit an American Indian student from wearing American Indian regalia, tribal regalia, or objects of cultural significance at a graduation ceremony.
Thank you, Isis. Any discussion? Director O'Connor?
No, not really.
All right, I don't have anything either, so this one will be on consent.
Consent?
Yes. All right, and then we'll move on to policies with no changes. Policy 497, Employee Workday, presented by Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Not real sure on the procedure at this point, but I have no changes.
All right. Any discussions?
Nope. Because there was no changes, and I just read through it. So.
All right, I don't have any comments either, so 497 will be on consent. Alrighty. And then moving on to policy 409, employee publications, instructional materials, inventions, and creations, presented by Amina Aftadal, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment.
Upon review of this policy, we don't have any changes that we would suggest this time.
This one is very short, any discussion?
Yeah.
No?
Nope.
All right, 409 will be on consent. Right, and then we'll move on to 612.1, development of parental involvement policies for Title I programs, presented by Amina Aftadal.
Thank you. Upon review of this particular policy, which we did do quite an extensive review to make sure that we were in alignment with Title I regulations and any changes that might have been made to Title I regulations and guidance, we did that particular comparison, making sure that we were in alignment, and also looking at the parent involvement plans for each of the sites that received Title I funds, and felt as though those were in alignment with the policy as well. We don't have any recommended changes at this time.
All right, sounds good. Any discussions?
Nope, not on this one.
All right, I don't have anything either, so 612.1 will be on consent. And I think that's all of the policies we have to review today, so we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.